Good evening, everyone. Welcome to SoulFood Poetry Night. Thank you for braving the wet weather and traffic and stormy winds and all that. I'm glad you made the choice to be here. We're glad to have you. And I know we're in for a great night of poetry. I'm Michael Dillon Welch. I've been running SoulFood Poetry Night for almost 10 years, which is pretty exciting. This is our 10th year. We'll be celebrating next July on the 10th anniversary. So please come back for that and all the readings in between. Tonight our featured readers are Sean Bentley and Emily Warren, and I'll introduce them in a moment. But first I want to read a poem by Susan Oakes for those of you who might celebrate Christmas. The Times Herald that day had good news, sandwiched between bright, persuasive ads for year-end sales and the personal views of the conservative editor who was mad about the tax increase, but very pleased by the improving state of the economy. Housing starts last month increased, hotels, motels filled to capacity, some businessmen, tourists turned away. Two small-time investors scanned the Times over coffee, smiling, reading aloud. No recession today, one remarked, at least not that I can see. But you never know what to expect in this town. Royalty expected to arrive tomorrow. Secret summit peace talks planned. City crime rate down. Astronomers announced discovery of a new comet locally visible to the east in the late-night sky. Shepherds arrested for disorderly conduct. What kind of news article is that? They were probably drunk or high. They claim they saw angels. They're out of their minds. Susan Oakes. Thank you for the golf applause. Well, let's ramp that up for our featured readers. Okay, our first reader tonight is Sean Bentley, and if any of you have know his dad, Nelson Bentley, who taught for many years at the UW, he left many poets in his wake, and I'm glad Sean is one of them. His work has appeared in more than 100 journals and anthologies. His three collections are Grace and Desolation, which we have copies of here, Instances, and Into the Bright Oasis. He was co-editor of the award-winning poetry journal Fine Madness from 1986 to 2006. That's 20 years. And he currently works as a technical writer and editor, and he's a fine poet. I'm very pleased to welcome Sean Bentley.
Thank you, Michael. I've got kind of a mixed bag of work here. I went down in my archives yesterday in my grotto and decided to pick some works that I hadn't read recently. Got this quite a glare from these lights. So this one, let me know also if you can't hear me. My voice is notoriously soft. This is almost a Christmas poem. It's in the the spirit of giving with a little dark twist. And it's written from in the voice of an old alter ego of mine, Otto. Otto, rid of it all at last. Mine is the flight of drakes against the storm. Yours is the flight of drakes against the storm. Mine is the crippled flight of stairs. The same is now yours. Here, yours is the scarred frigate, the sun. Yours is sky, the giant cog. Yours is the cock crow, the trampled ruby. The end is yours. This cubicle is yours. This contraption of a life is yours. All of it. Yours, no dues or fees. Congrats. Put her there. Yours. One of my favorite, this is a long introduction which may or not be helpful, but one of my favorite writers is Brian Aldiss. He's a British sci-fi writer, and he wrote an entire novel where essentially nothing happens. And the book is about stasis and looking at things from different angles, the same person looking at something repeatedly, and then another person looking at the same thing repeatedly. And it's this very postmodern kind of novel. So at the same time that I was reading that, I was staying with my grandmother in Los Angeles, and she had a painting on her wall, which was absolutely hypnotic. It was not a very good painting, and it was sort of a, I'd say, late 19th century picture of this kind of gypsy girl lounging rather provocatively on a bench, and this little boy with a lute was playing, eyeing her up. But it was this huge thing in the middle of their living room, and I spent a lot of time looking at it, and I wrote this poem about that painting and this notion of the other thing about the Brian Aldiss book, which, by the way, is called Report on Probability A, is that a pre-Raphaelite painting figures very heavily into it. So I kind of ran with all that stuff and came out with this poem. It's called Untitled Painting. Untitled Painting. Evening is overcast with yellow mist, and along the wall's decaying top, palm fronds hold to their courses, steady as becalmed ships. In this small life, the boy's eyes watch her face as she turns it away. An unvoiced question hovers between them, the resonance within the girl's lute held like an oar as she breathes herself further. Untitled Painting. His kerchief typically droops. Her shoulder has escaped its strap of halter. Errand finished, on his way to another, he has put down his empty woven basket and lain on the stone bench affixed to the wall, curled himself as though to wait all evening for an answer he is sure he will get. Neither considers if there is more to do at this long moment. Untitled Painting. Beyond the wall, perhaps a villa or courtyard freezes with the final acts of dinner or beginnings of sleep. But in the warm evening are only the couple's bare feet and arms and loose-spun clothes, their eyes heavy, mouths turned in directions hopeful and at once sardonic. The night holds still for them. They cannot hear beyond the web they form. Untitled Painting. Beneath their feet, gravel swirls, stately and sure as a school of minnows. Even now, something is forming in the girl's mind. Dull as stone, a rainbow circles the hem of her dark dress. Between its colors lies the liveliest interplay in the bronzed and subdued evening, which evaporates and remains unknown with the question unworded, the answer an article of nature. This poem I wrote while I was in David Wagner's workshop, and I'm not sure what that has to do with anything, but I've never written anything like it since. And it's about a dream, and I eventually turned it into a short film, which was not very successful as far as being well made. But anyway, you just have to kind of close your eyes and go with this. It's called American Dream. At the time, also, I was really enjoying driving. I had a '64 Impala, which got about 6 miles to the gallon, and I would just get in it and drive, and usually wind up at some park or beach where I would write poetry in the middle of the night. I've lost my timer. Oh well, I'll trust you to tell me when it's... okay, American Dream. White line, white line, white line, white sheets line the city of sleep. Your eyes tour, your tires caress pavement like miles of sweet pea beneath your foot, the accelerator. White line, a language of flat colors and lines, arrows and curves ahead of your vision. You focus on each red pebble in the street, on each shred of glass, each white line, white line. Your car peers over hills, your wheels belly the road, lights light bushes at the verge. Your hands grip the wheel, the sheet you roll over with, and you hang a Rachel, negotiate the turns. Teeth in front gnaw bugs from the air. Once they caught a warbler, held it hanging, the white lines flashing in its dark eyes. White line, white line, white line, white line, white line. You have dreamed this. The white walls and hubcaps burn into your eyes a corona. The mirror explodes with sun as you tip over a hill. The road clears, the fire in the mirror, that white line of sleep pulling you on its thread through to daybreak. You drive home the dark. Thanks. This is another inexplicable one. It's called the Game of Sleepwalkers. They dream up rules to blind man's buff, grand as the concept of sleep. On drenched trousers and adhesive blouses, numerals blur drowsily. What do they pursue? What relays? What double plays? No one knows the sheet white field, floodlights doused, the referees unconscious. No one knows what somnambulists do during halftime. Perhaps whiskers grow, or speechless mouths go sour. Ending, beginning, a lethargic whistle climbs like bed fever. They play by second nature, fancying they ambulate the court's length, carried off on their own fantastic shoulders. The lackadaisical sweat of losing whatever pennant never wakes the team. As they sprint oppressively, they dream they are awake and will fall asleep to envision some nebulous match with innings so infinite they could sleep through them. What an idea, they scoff, rolling into the incomprehensible smolder of a huddle. It's a short one. It's another poem written about a painting, Still Life with Puppies, which was painted by Gauguin. And this is sort of written in the voice of Gauguin. I will refrain from putting a French accent to it. This year's wine saps are reasonable, though the young trees never belabored more than half a dozen. Each fruit's placid as a bowl of fish. Think of the brown seeds floating upside down as light shifts. These puppies, perhaps from a neighbor's yard, tussle like russets in watery broth. How is it they do not burst apart? At times, my room reeks of light long after a withdrawn moon. I've got a rather long one here that I'm debating. I think I'll read it. How am I doing for time? Halfway through. Excellent. Okay. So this may or may not be a spoiler, but many years ago I visited the new, at the time, natural history, or I guess it's just the History Museum in Victoria. And there was an entire floor that was a mocked up historical, it's like, here's what Victoria looked like in 1880 or earlier. You'd walk down the hall and there would be the butcher shop and so forth. And we were there early in the day and there was nobody around and it was a little spooky. So I wrote this poem in another alter ego of mine called The Man with Meadows in Both Halves of Him. And this poem is The Man with Meadows in Both Halves of Him Goes Back. Has an epigraph from Seattle poet Mark Hudson. as if someone in the streets had called him out, called him using an old nickname he couldn't ignore. 1909. Sunset washes the town to a clean gold. Mrs. Van Garten has just lifted the bicarbonate to her mouth. The bread wagon, sweet-smelling, has just clapped around the corner. The Marshall twins have just wrestled the calf into the parlor. Anna Hennessy has just closed her almanac softly. It says rain. Into the boarding house kitchen, the man with meadows in both halves of him appears out of the air, abrupt as a curtain opening. Mrs. Van Garten disappears. Anna, the Marshall twins, the bread man, disappear. The judge, just stepping out of the barber shop, disappears. Rex the hound vanishes halfway down the stairs. The man with meadows in both halves of him sees the stairs, the barber shop and wagon. They're fragile as snail shells. Sniffs the chamomile and cinnamon in the kitchen, sees the hanging parcel of garlic, feels the lace curtain his hand brushes. Through the second-story window he feels a breeze, hears soft noises which recede into the evening, recede as down a museum corridor. Everyone has vanished, a lost city. Alone he walks the hall, room filled with the artifacts of lives, clocks and pictures. He goes downstairs and into the empty street. There are the smoking cigar stub and the foamed beer at the tavern, the rows of pharmaceuticals unbought at the druggist's, the waiting room where the trains steam by and no one gets off and no one gets on. Slower he looks around the rooms. He cannot live here. The rooms are waiting for him to leave so they may resume. When he walks out, he knows Dr. Feiss will wipe the cod liver oil off the lip of the bottle. Rex the hound will continue down the stairs and go to sleep. Miss Kate will reappear at her dressing table in the middle of buttoning. She will pin on her wide flowered hat and go to meet John Halliday at Riverside Park. They will pass the rhododendrons, and John will tell her she is pretty as a picture. When the man with meadows in both halves of him walks out, the smithy will finish his last horseshoe, Mr. Dulcie his last beer, Jane Potter the funny papers. Things will resume, things will conclude, things will begin. Soon all over town, people will be going to sleep. In the small library, books of jungle stories lie open thinly on the table. Soon they will be skimmed and then shut and then put away. A case of tweezers and scalpels in the middle of cleaning lies on the doctor's counter, rags and alcohol at the ready. He has just sterilized and polished the 2 hacksaws. In Reverend Gandy's house, his shaving brush drips into the sink. The water will begin to get hot in time for his evening service the whole town will go to. A dust devil crosses the main street, hard to see in the fading light, bumps up over the boardwalk and breaks on the wall of the store. Grass cut yesterday lies on either side of the school. Above the shreds of buttercups, the swings move slightly from a ghostly seat. Soon, Tom Berman will stay out too late. The Marshall twins will use their father's hair potion on the calf's forehead where he's been rubbing it against the barn. The man with meadows in both halves of him goes up the east side of the street, back down the west side, purposeful as dusk, looking in each lit window, hoping for someone he doesn't know but could. A curtain quickly put back, leg vanishing around a corner, someone he might remember if only he saw their expression, an apprehension, a recognition. Leaves creep down from the elms. It is a still life. He pauses at his own house. It is the year before he left it. He stays outside. He frames the scene, his father carried in, back broken by the maddened horse, the wine-colored rug turning darker. He remembers his family visiting in Madison while he and Belle Monroe shared the wide Davenport, their breakfast of oranges and honey. He remembers his room very well, the walls, how he sat there still as a picture when he thought he'd never see her again. Each night the sun went down in his west window. He was the first to see the comet through that window, white and thick as a whip. He walks on. Soon Anna Hennessy will be assaulted by the idiot who lives past Hartford's farm. No sound makes its way through the street except the knocking of loose fence boards. Even the stable is quiet. The man with meadows in both halves of him is sure someone is in there, but cannot open the big double doors, cannot. He turns back toward the boarding house. He knows that the Great War will be won, how it will send home only half the boys it takes, and those with legs and fingers gone. He knows the crying, loading the dark hours, tight as a troop train. He knows the droughts and epidemics, the floods. They steer straight for the town. The dam will still be built and destroy its edges. They are not letting him tell them. Now the oats are thick, tall as a gold forest, but 10 years on the crops fail. Anna Hennessy goes mad with grief for her fiancé lost at sea. He cannot save anyone. Here everyone is lost. He pictures his old tribe of friends, their hideouts in the woods, the visits of distant relatives from distant places, and how they were no closer when they arrived. He remembers the early mornings he threw pebbles at Elaine Mercy's window till she blew, at last, a kiss. His twin sisters, who for 8 years hardly spoke to each other, but who together died from cholera in the same room. He remembers all the dogs that ever ran away from him, all the unending afternoons lying by the creek watching toads and grebes, all the nights, the amazing still nights. The young women will leave the town for their strong and beautiful husbands. The man with meadows in both halves of him steps once more by the kitchen window, watches like a comet the lights of the town hall, feels the heat from the pot-bellied stove behind him. The soup for tomorrow simmers. Beneath his fingers, the rough window frame waits. A breath of wind touches him. There, he cannot bring Anna Hennessy any closer than that. Across town toward the mountains, he sees the meadows stacked with grain. In the last light, they looked covered in a watery blood. He steps faintly from the room, like the final tear of a morning. So it's election time, beginning to be, for better or worse. And when I stumbled upon this poem last night, I thought it was somehow appropriate. It's called The Dummy. The dummy is the dummy caught and tried for wooden-headedness, for gibberish, inciting and encouraging, for being the dummy who hangs his brainless head, who claims, confesses, who is hung up like 6 shooters never to be used again. The dummy who salutes as he goes out, the nouveau dummy, his shiny perfect hair, his wooden ears and wooden jaw and wooden head. And I think I'll close with this one, which is my SoulFood poem. Let's see, how can I introduce it? I was in England in 2005 with my son and a friend of his. They were both about 12, and that was the summer that there was the bombing in London, the buses that got bombed. Aside from all the other crap that was going on, wars and what have you, the mood in London was pretty fraught. So we were sightseeing. The bombs, by the way, went off like half a block from our hotel, which fortunately we weren't there at the time, but if we had been there a week later, we could have been blown up. We went to St. Paul's Cathedral, so this poem is called Cathedral, and it's about past and present, I guess, and what we haven't learned. The cathedral was swathed in scrims and scaffolding. Sandblasters scoured off the grime of the century. We'd found the door like the loose end of a bandage to begin the unraveling. Now from the observation deck, halfway up St. Paul's, from which London flowed lava-like in all directions, sun-shot and hazy, we spiraled down hardwood steps 537 like maple seedlings toward terra firma, past graffitoed names knifed into the stucco 200-300 years ago, stairs buffed, darkened, eroded by generations of feet, the pious or curious. Through occasional windows like arrow slits, the city revealed itself, but we were encased in the entrails of history. We continued down to the crypt, cool and oddly bright, to help us see the residents beneath, behind the stone slabs, incised with names and dates like the walls, with lore, with epitaphs, Henry Moore, his plaque as angled and un-Moore-like as the rest, Samuel Johnson, Bulwer Lytton, the great Turner at our feet, and back to Blake, bust black, globe-pated and pugnacious, until, well-warmed, parched, awed, we gravitated to the Crypt Cafe, where across from the tea dispenser a great placard served as tombstone for those who had lain here before the first cathedral fell in the Great Fire, including, holy crow, King Ethelred, died 1016. It sank in as we chewed our sandwiches, absorbing the ancient holy space transmogrified to museum. We bought our postcards and replicas of Roman coins and exited into the blast of summer London, the stink of tourist buses. The priest intoned as the door shut about this week's Iraqi deaths, the Sudanese, the wars never far, despite the lessons we should have learned since Ethelred ruled. We wished for peace, change as incremental and perceptible as the bending of all those sturdy stairs to the persistent will of foot after patient foot. Thanks very much.
Thank you, Sean. That takes me back to St. Paul's. And I wonder if that museum, I've yet to visit the museum in Victoria. I wonder if that street is still there. I don't know. Thank you. Next up, we have Emily Warren. She has earned degrees from Kalamazoo College and the University of Washington. Her full-length collections of poetry include The Leaf Path from 1982. She's been at this a while. The Novice Insomniac and The Shadow Architect. Those are more recent. She has published 2 chapbooks, The Book of Esther and Highway Suite, and is the founding editor of poetryfoundation.org, which is a big deal. Warren's poems and criticism have been published widely in journals and magazines, including Book Forum, Blackbird, Jacket 2, Parabola, Seattle Times, Poetry, The Writer's Almanac, The Bloomsbury Review, and The Stranger. She is a former Wallace Stegner Fellow. When was that? 94. So I was around Stanford around then. Didn't know. And she has held writer-in-residence positions at institutions such as the Bush School in Seattle, Sun Valley Center for the Arts, Centrum Foundation, and the Wurlitzer Foundation at Taos, New Mexico. She divides her time between Seattle and Twisp. Have you been to Twisp lately? I guess there's snow there. Please welcome Emily Warren.
Hello, everybody. The very first reading I ever gave was at Nelson Bentley's infamous or famous poetry readings. He was welcoming to all. And it was my first poem was published by Sean's father. And it was called The Bull Moose. And it was about these botanists timing how long moose could stay underwater. They were actually paid to do this. But anyway, it was so he published my first poem. It was the first reading. So I had no he said, well, how do I introduce you? And I said, well, why don't you tell people I took 3rd place in the Cedro Willie log competition because I moved here to work for the Forest Service, and he liked that. But that night was the first and last time the Seattle Sonics won the world championship. So it was quite a momentous night. So I'm reading, and the cheers are coming through the window, and everybody could care less about the bull moose and poetry, but it kept going. So Sean read a poem about people who can't sleep or who sleepwalk. And so I thought I'd read this poem called The Novice Insomniac from my second book of poems called The Novice Insomniac. It has the same kind of feeling as your poem, a little otherworldly. And at dawn, another insomniac stumbles in. I'm imagining that they have a ward, for insomniacs where they can commit themselves. At dawn, another insomniac stumbles in, tired, holding her head in her hands, a spinning globe on a demented axis. Arrest my wobbling centrifugal whirl, she pleads. My dream lobe is awry. We cringe at another walking nimbus. How insomniacs hate their misfiring nervous systems, malevolent maelstroms, colliding molecules falsely aligned by the past. We hold steady before their blank, buzzing minds, dispelling rumors of chimera and shame. Why are they so zingy? Some have extrasensory hearing, sonars for rustling and creaks. Others are brooders, intent on their next mistake. The dazed insomniacs stare at the second hand of the clock, another broken satellite. Their job to track its frozen orbit. Free will is a concept they shelve next to the supernal realm and self-esteem. Unbound text scatters at their feet, misfiled hopes, one-sided arguments, devotionals to vacant selves, a discontinuous stream of haywire memories that are hoarse from shouting, from hauling the self, mesmerized in front of our trick mirrors, where they pull their faces into shape for their hour-long stroll outside. That was not the poem I intended to read, but I read. The other one was more humorous. Okay, I have to start off tonight's reading with a poem about the rain. Uh-oh, I was afraid this would happen. I'll just read this short poem. It's I've been trying to become a rower for the last 5 years, and I row on a fairly competitive team, and this poem is called Learning to Row. I rock the boat, me with my moth wings, they with their monarchs, oh butterflies of the water. This is my soul food poem. I don't know, aren't all poems soul food poems? Yeah. So this is called The Word, and it's written in TWISP, and so I don't need to explain to you what slash burning is, right? All right, quite right. The Word. The Word comes along out of the mountain every once in a while to chill me. Undercurrent of an unwillingness to believe all is well in early spring beside a molten river riven by sun. Loud hush and glug through leafless aspens, white hot glacial water, the gravel bar, a pulled switch, splits the current. A bull trout with fluorescent red dorsal fin eddies in a pool between a sloughed-off root clump and caved-in grassy bank. Last year's dreams, a busted garden gate, drowned trees, slash piles. Heed me and hear my loneliness, split by desire to be known by a crowd of solitaires and by one word split. A raven falls out of the yellow flame of a willow, its wings purely black buff sunlight. It paces the gravel bar, lifts into westerly sun, wing flash, black luster, gone. It is hope that tricks, belief that when this now will shine, this now shines with or without us, then why scribble the Veery's mid-morning martial song? Soon Rick will arrive to help burn wood piles, gasoline, newspaper, cedar shakes to start the blaze in this vast emptiness, searching for God words. The ones God hears when priests without shoes, without socks, with their shawls over their heads, arms out, make forts of light, their backs to the congregation, their faces toward the ark, they rock, their white wings so pure that this now is no more than then, with its barbells of silence, with its task of burning. So when you get to be my age, or maybe anyone's age, you've had a lot of souls depart this planet, and that's happened quite a bit in the last couple years. So this is, I'm going to read some grief poems. This is called Settling Accounts. Seeking rag with silver polish, seeking auditor of spoons, seeking interior of a thicket where wrens fly and crows can't, cawing and pumping up and down. I call to hear your voice so I can imagine your face. Every moment while I am parting ways, the sun tries tearing apart the thicket. At 12, I sold seeds and candles door to door, hawking marigolds and lights. Honey, look, a girl selling seeds. 5 cents for a packet of carrots, 10 for asparagus. Others shut the door. Not now, not now. I want to sit on a twig and watch without from within. You say you're not going anywhere, though cancer is loving living in the thicket of your bones where doctors can't reach. See how useless it is to caw at dawn, our short flights. And then this is a poem for the same person who died. After she died, it's called A Word with You. And it begins with the epigraph by Simone Weil, which is absolutely unmixed. Attention is prayer. Still some purple, some scent in 2 sprigs of lavender I picked when you were alive. One for me, one for you. I fit them in Kuan Yin's small white ceramic hands as a herald and flag, flying yet still, as we sat still, gazing before we spoke, so many eons in a lifetime, in 2 lifetimes, in a room at the back of a beauty parlor, in a room above a parking lot, in a room beside a harbor. Kuan Yin and I are watching over you, I wrote on the photo of her posed in front of the billowy herb garden. Were you well enough to see the lavender sway a little? 2. Do not get depressed because you can't eat chocolate or cockroaches. Do not regret a winter without snow. Do not miss her. Do not. 3. If a part of me died with you, then how could you die without me? I am impoverished with no chance for a word with you, for words from you to counter mine, a ward of you. 4. You are my barbed wire now. I cannot possibly feel your absence if I did not fully know you in the logic of a one-way mirror. I cannot feel your absence without you. 5 years ago, you gave me Kuan Yin to fix my jumpy thoughts on an object, the one who hears the suffering of the world. I listened to her as you listened to me until seeking you became a presence. 6. I picked 2 sprigs of lavender on the day you died and placed them in Kuan Yin's hands. 4 heralds and 4 flags now, flying yet still as you are. Back to TWISP. Maybe I have a short poem to read you. No. I do, but this is kind of leaves people befuddled, so I'll read it twice. And it's called The King and the Seer. And the idea is, in Judaism, there's a story, a legend about a king and a messenger. And in Buddhism, there's a story about a king and the messenger. And so this is about both stories kind of merged into one. And what it's really thinking about is if you're the seer, like you're the person who knows some holy truth, and you help other people try to seek it, that in some way you're a thief because you're taking away their life or who they were and giving them something. So in a way you're giving them their life, but in a way you've changed them into someone who's seeking. So the self, in a way they're stealing the self. Does that make sense? So this is called The King and the Seer. And it begins actually, it's a Zen koan. The king asks, "Tell me, what is the highest meaning of the holiest truths?" The seer answers, "Emptiness, without holiness." The king is a restless seeker. The seer is a ruler and thief. I am seriously watching how trees are always missing some leaves. They sweep the air looking for them. Nothing distracts them. Nothing. Where leaves are missing between the branches, beautiful sun porches, which disappear when the tree reaches them. "Who are you?" the king asks. "It is not like that," the seer says. The seer leaves the king alone in his throne room and starts walking to China, kicking up gravel, hurrying to find the next king. On the road between country houses, he stops to listen to trees digging the air for crickets. He wonders whether the king is mad now, like the trees, or dancing and recounting the story without an end. Do you need to hear that again, or is that's good enough? Okay. I think I have time for one more poem. One more? Oh, a couple more. This is, I'll read 2 more in a hurry. So this is in TWISP, but everyone will be able to relate to it because it's about, well, it'll convince you never to buy a second home or cabin. TWISP spring chores. I promised to lop off salsify and dandelions, burn knapweed, scythe fanatical aspen clones. The slowly moving fat clouds fingerprint scaffold ridge, looking for a creek in the drought-sick dog-hair woods. Without a religion to fix, I fix my beliefs. I believe that the goat farmer down the road set the price too high for her organic feta. I believe pink lady apples sacrifice taste for crispness. I believe each time we hear the call to prayer, we pray. I believe I should hire a strong man to shovel 5 yards of 3/4-inch drain rock. I would like to own his transport, a jump truck and front end loader, though I'd like even more to wear the uniform of a game warden. I could solve our turkey problem. Ropey, wattled necks, stutter flights, dozens of malnourished flocks, offspring of the man who set a few free. Yesterday I tied flash tape to the garden gate to stop them from devouring salad greens. I mix up oil and gas to run the metal mower, chainsaw, and weed whacker. I will live up to my promise to brush back the wilderness, knowing snowberries, fire ants, below-grade wasp nests will multiply, replicating my chores. My ruinous mood is modulated by the thrum of whirling blades and chains. I'm an inebriate of exhaust, communicant of the caliphate of open space. I believe we named the Alaskan yellow cedar to see it shedding imaginary snow. I believe in my attachment to all living things. I believe in boredom and moseying up to loss. If I could find the weed whacker's brush attachment, I could dispatch the new aspen shoots. I believe we cannot rename God. I believe in painting outhouses pastel colors and destroying carpenter ant colonies with my hands and pickaxes. Sometimes I believe destroying things is the only time I feel attached. When I sweat in the heat, I am compassionate toward ferns. I know you want to understand why God is a safe substitute for suffering. Now that I have dulled my attachments, I hear the patient horsetails stepping to higher ground. So one more, or is that it? You think? One more. Okay, this is this summer I went on a rafting trip, solo. We had solo kayaks on the Green River in Utah. I don't know if you've ever been there, but it was 8 days down the wilderness, and this thing happened while we were on it. And Esther is my alter ego, and I have a whole book of Esther poems, and she's been with me my whole life, and I'm not going to explain about her now, but she's someone in a way I also lose again and find again. And she's also the other person I lost. So we were in Desolation Canyon. Esther, I know I don't know you, though I embolden you in the oddest, wild places. This evening mayflies hatched, catfish too, or so it seemed, invisible until they emerged, trawling the silty brown river, wide mouth. Oh, I'm done. Okay, this is an earlier version of it, so I got confused. Okay, so I'm at this river, and the catfish and the mayflies hatch, and they're wide-mouthed, rubbery black, ugly as muscular mottled orange koi, lapping scummy Japanese gardens. Dozen now in a swirling shore eddy, gumming mayfly corpses before they sink. You are invisible, Esther, yet alive, as this whole fleeting world interacting without end, though we try to smother it. The minuscule lives of glorious mayflies, translucent black negligee wings, airlifting plumb bob bodies, flying for a few hours or seconds. Are they blind too? Swarms rise and fall in the air as they bump and recoil from each other. I nab a mayfly for poetry, cup it in my hand so it won't die or fly away. At the base of its elongated body are two tails, V-shaped, translucent, narrow gauge landing gear, which on lightly brushing a rock or leaf signal to wings to push off and up. Some so high they disappear in the ether between the cliffs. The catfish, too, have antennae, whiskers for sensing nymphs in muck on the river floor. In your asexual, prehistoric crevice dwellers with gills and 5 eyes, catatonic for years before they fly. In your absence, Esther, is the planet's presence, and so mine. Though you no longer sense it, you inhabit it with me, who must record through my quivery antenna what you are missing. No end to your ending, my only comfort. You are parceled into dust, passing through. Somewhere I long to converse. Thank you.
Thank you, Emily, for nabbing a mayfly for poetry. And thank you also to Sean for reading. Let's take a short break now, get something to eat or drink at the bar. Thank you to SoulFood, as always, for hosting us. We're very grateful, as always. Short break. And if you haven't yet signed up on the open mic, I think the sheet is over there. And the question of the month is, what would you like to be reincarnated as, if you're reincarnated? Okay, break time.